Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim McCardle. We're pleased to be able to visit today with State Representative Todd Hunter from House District 32 down along the coastal bend and chairman of the House Calendars Committee. Chairman Hunter, thanks for coming in today.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
You're a state representative from 1988 to 1997, then have come back for second term here in 2008. And as chairman of the Calendars Committee, you're also on the Redistricting Committee. Before we get into redistricting, I thought it'd be helpful. Tell us a little bit about the Calendars Committee. What does it take to actually pass a bill on the House floor? People think it's easier than it probably is, but you've got a big, difficult job herding all those members.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realize what the Calendars Committee is the gatekeeper. It's unique to Texas. There's not a lot of states that have this, and the current concept is it's a 15-member committee. I chair that committee, and any House bill that is to be voted on by the House or any Senate bill that is to be voted on by the House comes to our committee, and it basically, the committee members have input on whether we should set those bills for a vote. And things like the budget and things like redistricting, which you mentioned, or emergency items when the governor set, those general bills you place on because they have time constraints, and a lot of times they may have a constitutional impact. What this committee does is it basically oversees the flow of legislation onto the House floor.
So you, I would imagine, are constantly being asked by your fellow members, get my bill on the floor, get my bill on the floor. Let me jump to a slightly different angle. We've had other representatives, senators, tell us and sit right here and say this was arguably the most successful, given the budget scenario, the most conservative session in the history of Texas, but yet there's still some concern, or it seems like some unknowing amongst the grassroots. Talk about that, if you would, for a minute.
Absolutely. This was a very, very conservative session. If you're a fiscal conservative, you're very happy, and if you are a pro-life conservative, you're very, very happy. Give you an example. In the past, as you and I know, I've never understood why we didn't pass the pro-life license tag, the choose life license tag, something simple and common sense like that.
Yes.
This time it was set on the calendar, it was authored, and it was passed. These are the sort of things to send the signal to Texas that you do have pro-family in the state of Texas. Fiscal responsibility, we got some criticism because we didn't have as much money as we've had in the past. So we had to hold on to a lot of the funds.
It's almost as difficult or a more difficult battle when you're short of funds than when you have too much money.
Absolutely. And a lot
Establishing
of times,
priorities, though, is what happens, correct?
Absolutely, and that's what happened this session. So I would agree with those members. This was a very, very fiscally responsible, very, very pro-family session. And that doesn't mean we have to stop here. We can grow here on the next sessions.
Okay, speaking of growing, let's jump to the subject of redistricting. You have been a member of the Redistricting Committee. We have 101 Republicans in the House right now, 48 Democrats. Tell us where we are, if you can, from your perspective on the committee. What is the latest development in the court cases going forward right now?
Well, what's happened is we've become more litigation prone, litigious in the redistricting process. It seems every 10 years more lawsuits or more law involvements involved.
And you've been involved in tort reform before.
Absolutely. In fact, I authored most of it
right.
in the mid-90s. I authored most of the things that occurred when George Bush came in as president. Where we are is basically a law battle. You have a Washington, D.C. court that looks at what's called Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. That means pre-clearance. Then you have a Section 2 court, that's the one in San Antonio, who has authority to draw maps. What you have right now is two courts that are kind of overseeing everything. The San Antonio court may be waiting on the Washington, D.C. court. If they do, there'll be more time. The Section 2 court, which is San Antonio, may want to go out and put some maps out, which they can. And then a lot of your viewers, a lot of your folks are going to be saying, when are we going to have elections?
That's right.
Until the courts make that ruling, you really can't set definite election dates.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. Tell us, though, during the legislative session, you as members of the committee are crunching numbers, you're looking at data analysis. you're accused of dividing precincts and so forth. What is the process you go through to make those maps a reality?
Well, it is very, very difficult, and you have to follow a state law, and you have to follow the federal law, and you have to go through a whole process, and then you try to go into areas. What made it more difficult is Texas is now the #2 most populated state in the United States. And think about it, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas now are in the top 3 most populated cities in the United States. So it adds more difficulty on trying to draw. And we try to do a fair job, but as you know, as I've learned as being a lawyer, you don't always get compliments on trying to do the good job. But I think everybody tried. Now it's in the litigation circle, so it's being reviewed on whether they think this law applied or this did not. We'll see how it turns out.
And now we're betwixt and between, everybody's talking about a May 29th
Sure.
primary date. Tell us, if you will, because you've come up through the grassroots even as a young man, but at the local level, we're hearing a lot of folks concerned about how to have their precinct conventions after the primary. The state conventions, both Democrat and Republican, are in early June. They have to go through the elector process to get into the electoral college. What are some of the difficulties you see existing there in layman's terms, and are we going to be able to eventually work through it with a May 29th deadline?
I think that if you have a May 29th deadline, I think you can make the deadlines. I think you can make a lot of these programs. A lot of the filing, a lot of the planning can be made. If you go beyond May into a June or even a July, then all of a sudden you're crunching yourself up to a November deadline. So I still think that there's hope. I think that the court is being very serious on taking a look at this, but I think we can. If we move past the May 29th, then I do think you have a hard time on having a lot of the precincts, the county as well as the state.
So right now, Texas as a state is waiting on, and we're worried about the federal court or the DC court establishing maps. Any prediction on which might break first?
You know, you really don't know that. The DC court doesn't do the maps, but they provide guidance. The Section 2, the San Antonio can provide. And I will say in the last few weeks, the San Antonio court has been very proactive. But you're correct. We're waiting right now for either both courts or one of the courts to give us direction.
Okay, well, Representative Todd Hunter, we're going to respect your time and leave it there. Chairman of the House Calendars Committee, member of the Redistricting Committee from House District 32. Thanks for coming in. We want to have you back here as this unfolds.
I'll be there.
Appreciate you joining us on Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim Cardle, and remember, you're either an insider or you're not. Thanks for joining us.